It was a bright afternoon in downtown Los Angeles. The streets were busy with shoppers, tourists, and families enjoying the weekend. Chuck Norris, dressed casually in a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and sunglasses, was walking with a sense of calm confidence. His steps were measured, and his eyes scanned the surroundings, not for danger, but simply observing life as it moved around him. Nearby, two uniformed police officers were on patrol, walking in the opposite direction. They noticed Chuck, but instead of recognizing the man before them, they saw someone who looked suspicious. Their eyes narrowed, and a smug smile crossed one of the cops' faces. "Hey, you there!" one barked, striding up aggressively. Chuck stopped and turned slowly. His expression didn't show fear, anger, or irritation. Just calm, unshakable composure. "Yes, officer?" he asked, voice measure polite. The officer, clearly feeling bold, demanded, "ID. Now, and what are you doing here? This isn't your neighborhood." His partner circled behind Chuck, folding his arms, as if preparing for confrontation. Chuck reached into his pocket, producing his ID without a hint of hesitation. "Here you go." "Is there a problem, officer?" he said, his voice calm but edged with quiet authority. The first officer snatched the ID and examined it closely, frowning. "You people don't just stroll through here acting like you own the place. Who are you meeting? Where are you going?" Chuck's family, walking a few steps behind him, exchanged nervous glances. His calm, steady presence seemed to radiate a strange power. People nearby paused, sensing tension. Some subtly took out their phones, recording the scene, intrigued by the escalating confrontation. The officer stepped closer, invading Chuck's personal space. "Don't talk back. Answer me properly." Chuck's eyes didn't waver. He stood tall, hands relaxed at his sides, and said softly but firmly, "Officer, I'm just walking with my family. I haven't caused anyone any trouble. Isn't that what we all should be doing?" The cop scoffed, clearly frustrated, but Chuck didn't flinch. Around them, a few bystanders whispered, noticing the odd imbalance of power. There was something about this man, calm, unshaken, commanding attention without raising his voice, that made the aggressive officers look small, unprepared, and outmatched. What the cops didn't know was that they had just stepped into a situation they could not control. And what Chuck did next shocked everyone standing there. The officer's frown deepened as he studied Chuck's ID. Doesn't look like anything special. Who do you think you are, strolling around here like you own the place?" he sneered. His partner crossed his arms, nodding as if backing up his arrogance. Chuck Norris didn't respond with anger. He simply tilted his head slightly, eyes calm, observing the two men. "Officer, I'm just walking with my family. I'm not here to cause trouble," he replied, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made the officers pause ever so slightly. The first officer laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. "Walking with your family? Sure. Maybe you're just trying to hide something. Step over here and answer my questions properly." Chuck's wife, walking just behind him, whispered nervously, "Honey, maybe we should just go. They're getting aggressive." Chuck placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've done nothing wrong. I'll handle this." He spoke softly, but there was an unmistakable authority in his tone, a presence that drew the attention of everyone nearby. Bystanders had begun to notice. A young woman holding a coffee cup subtly raised her phone, recording. A man sitting on a bench paused mid-conversation, eyes narrowing at the scene unfolding in front of him. Chuck's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the cop's arrogance. "Don't give me that tone," the officer barked, taking a step closer. "I said answer me. Who are you meeting? What's your business here?" Chuck inhaled slowly. "I'm meeting no one. I'm simply walking. And isn't it strange that you assume someone's guilty just because of how they look?" The first officer's face flushed. He didn't like being questioned or challenged, even subtly. "Watch your tone, buddy," he said, his hand brushing against his belt, fingers unconsciously near the holster. Chuck remained still. "Officer, respect works both ways. I'm respecting your position, and I expect the same. If I'm wrong, tell me. If not, perhaps we can all just continue peacefully." The tension in the air thickened. People walking past slowed down, sensing something unusual. Whispering began to ripple through the crowd. "Who is this guy?" a teenager asked. "Why aren't the cops making him leave?" One of the bystanders, feeling bold, stepped a little closer. "Sir, do you really need to be this aggressive?" The officer snapped. "Mind your own business." Chuck glanced at the growing crowd and, without raising his voice, addressed the officer again. "You have authority, yes, but true authority doesn't need intimidation. Threatening me or my family doesn't make you stronger. It only exposes insecurity." The officer's jaw tightened. He muttered something under his breath. "Let's see how calm you are when things get serious," he hissed, stepping closer and invading Chuck's personal space. "Have you ever seen someone being unfairly harassed by authority? Comment below and tell us which country or city you're watching from." The crowd began to murmur. Phones were out everywhere now. Some people whispered to their friends, "There's something about him. He's so calm, but he's making those cops look ridiculous." The second officer, still smug, tried to regain control. "Move aside. You're wasting our time. We don't have to explain ourselves." Chuck's eyes met the officer's, unwavering. "Officer, wasting time is relative. Standing here, escalating tension while people watch. Aren't you wasting everyone's time, including your own?" A few people gasped. Others exchanged glances, recording every word. Chuck's calm and measured responses were not just polite. They were like mental jabs, exposing the arrogance and impatience of the cops. "Listen," Chuck continued, "I understand your job. You're supposed to protect people. But protecting isn't about harassing, threatening, or judging someone without cause. Isn't that right?" The first officer took a step back, visibly frustrated. His partner exchanged a glance with him, clearly unsettled by the calm dominance Chuck radiated. Every passerby who had stopped to watch was now recording, whispering, or stepping closer to witness what was about to happen. Chuck's wife whispered again, "Honey, maybe we should leave." He shook his head slightly, still calm. "No, we've done nothing wrong. And sometimes, standing your ground teaches more than running away." The officer, now growing impatient and humiliated in front of the crowd, tried a last intimidation tactic. "If you don't cooperate, you'll regret it." Chuck smiled faintly, not in arrogance, but in quiet certainty. "Regret isn't mine to feel, officer. Perhaps you'll be the one learning a lesson today." The surrounding crowd now whispered, some even laughing quietly. Phones were everywhere, capturing the interaction from multiple angles. The cop's confidence was slipping, replaced with visible tension, as Chuck's calm, unwavering demeanor turned the tables mentally, without a single punch thrown. The cops thought they were in control, but they had no idea what was coming next. When Chuck decides to escalate, it won't be with anger. It'll be with precision that shocks everyone around him. The air in the crowded street had become thick with tension. Passers-by slowed their pace, curious whispers spreading like wildfire. Chuck Norris stood perfectly still, his calm gaze fixed on the first officer. The cop, increasingly frustrated by Chuck's unwavering composure, began pacing back and forth, muttering under his breath. His partner mirrored the frustration, crossing and uncrossing his arms nervously. "Step aside. I said move." The officer barked, his voice rising as his control over the situation slipped. His words were meant to intimidate, but they fell flat against Chuck's calm demeanor. Chuck didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, letting the officer see the quiet certainty in his eyes, a certainty that unnerved the arrogant man more than any physical threat could. Chuck's family, standing just behind him, could feel the mounting tension. His wife whispered, "Honey, please just walk away. Let's not escalate this." Chuck shook his head ever so slightly, his voice gentle but firm. "We've done nothing wrong. Walking away would teach them nothing. Sometimes standing still teaches more than running ever could." Bystanders, now more than a dozen, had begun filming with their phones. Some whispered nervously, some gasped, and a few even laughed quietly, sensing the cops' growing humiliation. "Who is this guy?" a man asked his friend. "Why aren't they making him leave?" The first officer, clearly feeling the pressure, stepped closer, invading Chuck's personal space. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but I said answer me properly, or there will be consequences," he snarled, his hand brushing near his belt. Chuck didn't react. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his calm aura intensifying. Consequences? Perhaps, he said, his voice measured, but threatening someone who has done nothing wrong is not courage. It's insecurity. The cop's face flushed, anger and embarrassment mixing. His partner shifted nervously, realizing that the situation was no longer under their control. Every passerby was recording, every whispered conversation highlighting the cops' escalating incompetence. Chuck's quiet dominance had turned the scene into a spectacle. "Don't talk back to me," the officer barked, raising his voice. Chuck tilted his head, eyes narrowing just slightly. "I'm not talking back. I'm speaking the truth. And truth has a weight that arrogance cannot lift." At this point, the crowd had grown. People whispered, "He's not scared at all. What is he thinking?" Another person laughed quietly, shaking their head in disbelief. Phones pointed at the confrontation captured Chuck's calm stance versus the officer's twitching, aggressive movements. The contrast was almost absurd. The second officer, clearly impatient, tried to regain some control. "Enough. We don't need the public watching this. Move along now." Chuck's calm gaze swept across the growing crowd. He pointed slightly toward his family, then back at the officers. "I am here with my family. We are not moving because we have done nothing wrong. Your attempt to humiliate me in front of witnesses only highlights your own insecurity." The first officer's face turned crimson. Sweat appeared along his temple. He tried one last intimidation tactic, taking another step closer. "You'll regret standing there. Mark my words." Chuck's jaw tightened just enough to indicate his awareness of the threat, but his voice remained soft, commanding, and deadly precise. "Regret is yours to carry, officer. Your arrogance has already written its own consequence. I am merely here to witness it unfold." Bystanders gasped at the mental precision in Chuck's words. The entire situation had shifted. The cops were no longer in control, and Chuck's calm, unwavering demeanor had trapped them in a psychological web. Every word he spoke made them more visible, more foolish, and more outmatched. If you were witnessing this scene, what would you do? Would you walk away, intervene, or stay frozen in awe? Type your answer in the comments. Chuck's family, sensing his focus and confidence, relaxed slightly, reassured by his presence. They watched as the crowd around them grew larger, phones out, capturing every interaction. Each whispered comment, every surprised look, highlighted the growing social pressure on the cops. The first officer tried to regain authority, attempting a stern glare, a raised voice, and a finger pointed at Chuck. But nothing worked. Chuck's calm dominance mentally cornered them. Every step they took to assert control made them look smaller, weaker, and ridiculous in the eyes of the gathering crowd. "Do you even understand what you're doing?" Chuck finally asked, not as a threat, but as a statement. "Harassing innocent people in front of witnesses only reveals your lack of judgment. You can intimidate, but your arrogance will betray you every time." By now, murmurs of recognition rippled through the crowd. Some people whispered, "Who is this guy? He talks like he's trained, disciplined." Others simply shook their heads, captivated by the spectacle. The officers glanced around nervously, now acutely aware of the growing scrutiny from every angle. Phones, whispers, and eyes tracking their every move. The power dynamic had completely shifted. Chuck's calm had mentally trapped them. Their aggression now exposed. The arrogance that had fueled this encounter was rapidly dissolving. The crowd waited with bated breath, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. And indeed, it was only a matter of time before Chuck's next move, the one that would completely humiliate the arrogant cops, changed everything. The cops thought they could intimidate him. They had no idea who they were really dealing with, and when recognition finally hits, it will leave everyone, crowd and officers alike, utterly stunned. The tension on the street had reached a palpable level. The officers, once brimming with arrogance, now fidgeted under the steady gaze of Chuck Norris. His calm, unwavering composure made the air feel heavier, as if the street itself was waiting for what would happen next. Among the growing crowd, whispers began to ripple like an electric current. "Do you know who that is?" one bystander asked another, eyes widening. A young man holding a coffee cup stepped closer, squinting at Chuck's face. "Wait, that's Chuck Norris?" he muttered under his breath. Instantly, the word spread. "Chuck Norris," someone whispered from the other side of the street. "The martial arts legend? The movie star." Phones were already recording, capturing the moment. The crowd's attention shifted from the confrontation to the man himself, murmuring excitedly. Yet the cops were completely oblivious. They still saw only a man standing his ground, not realizing they were facing a living legend. Their arrogance had blinded them to the obvious. Every twitch, every raised voice they attempted, only made them look smaller and more ridiculous in front of the crowd. Chuck, sensing the whispers, but never letting them dictate his actions, continued to stand calmly. He didn't gloat. He didn't leverage his fame. Instead, he maintained the same measured tone he had used from the start. Every word, every gesture reinforced the psychological pressure he had already built. "Step aside, sir," the first officer barked, voice cracking slightly now. "You're causing a scene." Chuck's gaze swept across the officers, calm but penetrating. "I'm not causing a scene. You are, and your attempt to intimidate only exposes your own lack of control." The second officer, still trying to act confident, glanced at the growing crowd. The murmurs were becoming louder. Some people were whispering excitedly to each other. "That's him. It really is Chuck Norris, the man you never mess with." Even the officers' body language began to betray them. Their arms tightened across their chests, feet shifting nervously. Chuck's calm, collected presence was an invisible pressure, a mental weight that made every small movement feel heavier, every word seem inadequate. Bystanders now began to speak up. A young woman stepped closer, phone raised, whispering to the cops, "Sir, don't you see? People are watching. Maybe it's time to calm down." The first officer shot a glare at her, but his words faltered. "Mind your own business," he stammered, the force in his voice already draining away. The second officer shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the public scrutiny was now stacked against them. Chuck's family watched quietly, reassured by his control over the situation. His calm was infectious. Even those in the crowd who had initially been tense or fearful now leaned forward, mesmerized by his presence. Chuck didn't need to fight physically. The mental dominance alone had captured the entire scene. One bystander, clearly recognizing the power shift, whispered loudly, "Do you realize what's happening? Those cops are about to regret everything." And he hasn't even moved yet. Chuck's eyes briefly scanned the crowd, acknowledging their awe with a subtle nod. "I've said nothing yet that is untrue. Authority should inspire respect, not fear. Arrogance blinds judgment, and today, that will become very clear." The officers, still unaware of the whispers of recognition, tried one last intimidation tactic, stepping closer and pointing fingers. "Move, or else." Chuck tilted his head slightly, a faint, knowing smile touching his lips. "Or else what? You still haven't realized who you're speaking to." The murmurs spread even faster now. People stepped closer, some gasping audibly. "That's Chuck Norris. The world knows him. The legend. He doesn't even need to fight," and they're already trembling. The first officer's face drained of color. His hand twitched near his belt, a nervous gesture that betrayed his fear. He had been trying to assert control, but now every eye in the crowd bore into him, and the whispers amplified his humiliation. The crowd, phones recording from every angle, whispered collectively, "He's not just anyone. He's Chuck Norris." Chuck's calm presence, combined with the public realization of his identity, created a psychological chokehold over the cops. Their arrogance, which had been so loud and confident only moments before, now looked pathetic. The tables were turning, slowly but inevitably. The cops thought they could intimidate anyone. They didn't realize the legend standing before them. And now, as recognition spreads, the moment of reckoning is only seconds away. The crowd had grown exponentially. People who were passing by had stopped, pulling out their phones, whispering in awe, and recording every second. Chuck Norris stood calm, steady, and unwavering, the epicenter of attention. The cops, once full of arrogance and authority, now shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny of the public and under the quiet, commanding presence of the man before them. The first officer, face flushed with frustration and embarrassment, tried to reassert control. "Listen, you're causing a scene. Move now or I'll—" Chuck interrupted, his voice calm, even, yet carrying a power that demanded every eye in the street to focus. "Officer, what you call causing a scene is nothing more than standing in truth. Threatening those who have done nothing wrong does not make you powerful. It makes you weak." A hush fell over the street. Even the most skeptical bystanders stopped in their tracks, sensing the weight behind Chuck's words. There was no anger in his voice, only a deliberate, unwavering force that made every word land like a punch. "You wear a uniform," Chuck continued, "to protect, to serve, to ensure justice. But when you misuse that authority, when arrogance and prejudice replace wisdom, you fail everyone, including yourself." The first officer's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, but Chuck held up a single finger, a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture commanding silence. The crowd obeyed instinctively. Chuck had already mentally dominated the situation. Now he was delivering the lesson, word by word. "Do you understand what you have done?" Chuck asked quietly, almost rhetorically. "You judged without reason. You threatened without cause. You assumed power without responsibility. And for what? To feel strong? Authority is not measured by fear, but by respect. And right now, respect is nowhere in sight." The second officer shifted nervously, realizing that Chuck's words were not just calm criticism. They were stripping away their credibility in front of every witness. Every bystander's gaze felt like a mirror reflecting their arrogance. Every whispered word was a reminder of the spectacle they had created. "Look around," Chuck continued, scanning the crowd. "All these witnesses, all these recordings, you wanted to intimidate one man, and instead you have exposed yourselves. This is not humiliation I am giving you. It is the natural consequence of arrogance without wisdom." The crowd was silent now, hanging on every syllable. Some bystanders whispered in disbelief. "He's not even shouting," and yet they're frozen. Others, filming from every angle, could see the officers' faces slowly draining of color, every twitch and nervous movement amplified by Chuck's calm dominance. Chuck paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle, letting the silence do part of the work. If respect were measured by size, strength, or uniform alone, maybe this encounter would be yours to win. But respect is earned, officer, and arrogance like yours can never command it. The first officer finally spoke, voice cracking slightly, trying to regain authority. You don't scare me." Chuck's lips curved into the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. "Scare? No, I'm not here to instill fear. I am here to reveal truth. And truth has a way of humbling even the most arrogant." At this moment, the second officer glanced at the crowd, noticing the dozens of phones recording, the whispers, the shifting energy of the witnesses. Their confidence was gone. The first officer's hand hovered nervously near his belt, a gesture born of insecurity rather than authority. Chuck stepped just slightly forward, not aggressively, but with undeniable presence. Authority is not a weapon. It is a responsibility. And when wielded carelessly, it becomes the very tool of your own undoing. Every word struck a chord with the onlookers. The crowd had become emotionally invested, hanging on every syllable, mentally comparing the arrogance of the officers to the calm, commanding presence of the man standing before them. The contrast could not have been starker. A young bystander whispered loudly, "I've never seen anyone command respect like that, without throwing a punch." Another nodded, holding their phone high, capturing every second. The officers, now fully aware that they were losing control, tried one last intimidation, stepping toward Chuck with raised voices. But Chuck simply met their gaze, calm, unwavering, a living example of moral and mental supremacy. The crowd reacted instantly. Murmurs of disbelief, gasps, and subtle applause began. The arrogance of the cops was crumbling in real time. Have you ever seen someone completely dominate a situation with words alone? Comment below insane if you're shocked by Chuck's calm power. Chuck's family, watching closely, felt the same awe as the crowd. He didn't need violence. His mental, emotional, and moral presence alone had immobilized two aggressive officers. Every gesture, every word, every pause was a lesson in control, humility, and power without arrogance. The officers' faces betrayed it all: frustration, embarrassment, confusion. They had come expecting to assert authority, and instead they were trapped, publicly exposed, and mentally cornered. The crowd now understood. Chuck Norris didn't need to fight to win. The cops thought the confrontation would end with them in control. But recognition of who they're facing is about to hit them, and when it does, the instant regret will be undeniable. The street had gone quiet, but the silence was charged, almost vibrating with anticipation. Every bystander held their breath, cameras aimed, whispers bouncing between spectators. Chuck Norris stood perfectly calm, his posture unshakable, eyes scanning the officers who were trembling under both public scrutiny and his quiet authority. Then it happened. One of the bystanders, unable to contain their astonishment, whispered just loudly enough, "Wait, that's Chuck Norris. The real Chuck Norris." The words spread instantly like wildfire. Phones were pointed directly at him now. People gasped audibly, their murmurs growing into a chorus of disbelief. "Oh my God, it is him. The legend. The man you never mess with." The officers froze. The first officer's face drained of color, eyes widening as recognition struck like a bolt of lightning. His arrogance evaporated instantly, replaced by shock and panic. He stammered, "What?" Chuck Norris remained calm, almost serene, as he took a deliberate step forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His presence alone commanded the street. Every word from him now carried double weight. Not just authority, but reputation. "You've been trying to intimidate a man who has done nothing wrong," Chuck said softly, yet every syllable landed like a hammer. "And you had no idea who that man was." The second officer, visibly shaking, looked around at the crowd, realizing that everyone now knew. Phones were recording their humiliation. Whispered recognition had spread throughout the entire block. "It's Chuck Norris. How could we?" He muttered, unable to finish his thought. Chuck's calm gaze met theirs, unyielding. "Do you see now? Your arrogance, your misuse of authority has been exposed. And it wasn't I who humbled you. It was your own actions, reflected back by your mistakes." The crowd erupted, not in violence, but in applause, murmurs of awe, and cheers. Some bystanders clapped. Others laughed quietly at the absurdity of the officer's prior arrogance. Phones continued recording, ensuring that this moment would spread far beyond this street. One brave bystander spoke up, pointing to the officers. "You just harassed a legend in front of everyone. Do you even realize what you've done?" The first officer's hand twitched near his belt, a nervous, ineffective gesture. His partner avoided eye contact, frozen. Every ounce of authority they had tried to assert moments ago had crumbled. The tables had turned completely. Chuck didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He had taught the lesson silently, through calmness, words, and presence. "Authority is a privilege," he said softly, turning slightly to the crowd while keeping the officers in view. "It is not a weapon for arrogance or intimidation. And when misused, it only brings regret." The crowd cheered again, some raising their phones higher, capturing the stunned expressions of the two officers. Every whisper of Chuck's name reinforced the realization. The cops had not just failed to intimidate him. They had publicly humiliated themselves. Chuck's family approached him, his wife smiling proudly, his children holding his hands. The calm, collected figure of Chuck Norris had not just defended his dignity. He had taught a universal lesson on humility, respect, and integrity. The first officer finally muttered, voice barely audible, "We didn't know." Chuck's eyes met his for a brief moment. "You didn't know," he said softly, because you never bothered to see clearly. Learn from this. Respect is earned, not assumed, and arrogance always finds its consequences. The second officer simply nodded, unable to speak. He glanced around at the crowd, realizing that the recording devices and eyewitnesses would carry this story far beyond the street, far beyond their department. The crowd continued applauding and whispering, some people still shaking their heads in disbelief. He didn't even fight them, and they're already humbled, one person said. This is insane. What would you do if you realized you had just harassed a legend? Comment your reaction below. Would you apologize instantly or just stand frozen like them? As the officers were left to absorb their instant regret, Chuck Norris took a step back. His calm aura softened, yet the authority lingered. He turned to his family, smiling gently, and walked away without a single word of gloating. The lesson had been delivered. The crowd understood, and the footage, captured from every angle, would soon be everywhere. By now, whispers of Chuck's identity had spread across the block and beyond. Every witness felt the gravity of the situation, how easily arrogance can lead to humiliation, and how composure, courage, and integrity can command respect far beyond physical power. The officers, left in stunned silence, had been mentally cornered, publicly embarrassed, and reminded of the consequences of arrogance. The street was now buzzing with chatter, phones buzzing, and social media about to explode with this moment. The legend had spoken, and the world was watching. The video is about to go viral. Millions will witness this lesson, and the arrogance of the cops will be exposed globally. The aftermath will spread far and wide, and the lesson of humility will echo everywhere. By the time Chuck Norris walked away, the scene on the street had become electric. Phones were still recording, and whispers of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Everyone who had witnessed the encounter knew they had seen something extraordinary, a living legend, calm, composed, and morally unshakable, turning a tense confrontation into a lesson in humility and respect. Within minutes, videos began circulating online. The shaky camera footage from bystanders, each angle capturing Chuck's calm dominance and the cops' visible humiliation, started appearing on social media platforms. Within hours, the clip was being shared globally. Comments poured in from every corner of the world. He didn't even need to fight. Arrogance meets instant regret. What a legend. Meanwhile, the two officers were left reeling. Their attempt to assert authority had backfired spectacularly, and the video now immortalized their failure. Every glance from onlookers reminded them that their arrogance had been publicly exposed and their reputation tarnished. The streets of Los Angeles would not soon forget this lesson, nor would the online world. Chuck's family walked alongside him, proud and relieved. That was incredible, his wife said quietly, still amazed by how composed he had remained. You didn't even have to raise your voice, and they were completely humbled. Chuck nodded, smiling faintly. Sometimes the strongest power is calmness, the quiet presence that forces others to reflect on their actions. Violence is never the first solution, but respect that is earned through integrity. Across social media, the story went viral. Millions of views accumulated within hours, with people from every country sharing their amazement. Hashtags like #InstantRegret, #ChuckNorrisLegend, and #RespectOverArrogance trended worldwide. Memes, short clips, and commentary videos flooded the platforms, all praising the calm and moral supremacy Chuck had displayed. News outlets picked up the story, interviewing bystanders who had witnessed the encounter firsthand. I couldn't believe my eyes, said one woman, phone still in hand. The cops were so aggressive, and then he just handled it perfectly. Calm, polite, but completely commanding. It was insane. The officers faced consequences almost immediately. Their department conducted internal reviews, and while they were not physically harmed, the reputational damage was profound. The lesson was clear. Arrogance and misuse of authority are never hidden in public spaces, especially when faced with someone of character and composure. Chuck Norris, however, did not gloat. He never did. The man who had just delivered an unforgettable lesson walked quietly with his family, embodying the message he had just taught. Humility, patience, and moral authority are more powerful than aggression and intimidation. If you believe no one should be judged by arrogance or appearance, type respect in the comments and share this story with someone who needs to see it. Where are you watching this from? The moral impact of the event spread far beyond the street where it had occurred. Schools, online forums, and social media groups shared the clip, discussing the principles it demonstrated. Parents used it as an example to teach children about humility. Martial arts enthusiasts dissected Chuck's calm, commanding presence. Leaders discussed it as a case study in how power should be wielded responsibly. The public recognition, the viral impact, and the immediate consequence for the cops reinforced a universal truth. Arrogance and intimidation cannot overpower integrity, composure, and moral authority. Chuck Norris had not just defended himself. He had reminded the world that true strength lies in patience, dignity, and quiet confidence. As the sun began to set over the city, Chuck and his family disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a trail of awe, respect, and a viral moment that would be remembered for years to come. The cops, the witnesses, and everyone watching online had experienced a lesson in humility and the consequences of arrogance, all without a single act of violence. And for those who watched, the message was clear. Power is respect, respect is responsibility, and arrogance always finds instant regret.